It's Thursday, March the 22nd, 2018. You're listening. Well, we'd like to welcome our viewers from across North America and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room, episode 89, coming to you from Oklahoma City and Austin, Texas. Jason Neiffer continues to focus, we hope, we're told, on getting his dissertation written, which is a much better priority than a fun, every once in a while podcast that we're doing. But I am Wes Fryer, the Director of Technology at the Cassidy School, and I'm joined by Mr. Carl Hooker in Austin. I'm so excited to have you on the show, Carl. How are you doing tonight?
I'm happy to be here, especially after the week we just had in Austin. So yeah, I'm Carl Hooker. I'm the Director of Innovation and Digital Learning at Eanes ISD right outside of Austin, Texas. And yes, Wes, we've had quite an eventful week with the Austin bombing events happening down here. So happy to be here for sure.
Absolutely. Well, we'll actually chat a little bit about that. And then I'd love to get an update on the new mode that iPad Palooza is taking for the next year. Yeah. You're the father of the feast with all the Learning Fest. But for people who are probably listening offline, you can check out all the show notes and things that we don't have time to discuss on edtechsr.com/links. We generally will try and put the links in a relative order to what we end up discussing. Generally, we're going to talk about the week's tech news and take an educational focus on that. But this week, man, there's been all kinds of stuff with Facebook and everything else going on. But yeah. Let's start with the bombing. That is just crazy. I saw your tweet earlier where you went outside and it was less than a mile away from your house. Yeah. That was like Tuesday or something.
So I was before we started the podcast, I was just telling Wes about this too. But I recently got some Ring cameras, which are essentially floodlights and doorbell cameras that are smart. You can hook them up to your phones and give you alerts. I've had them for about 2 months, and until this past week, I haven't been motivated to install them. So I was actually installing it 2 nights ago, and the last of what turned out to not be one of his explosions, it was some other incendiary device, went off about a mile from my house. And it turned out to be some random person that was turning in his grandfather's old Army stuff at a Goodwill. Really bad timing for it, but it blew up. And I heard it and kind of reacted, went on Twitter right away, followed the hashtag Austin bombings and saw it right away. Sure enough, I heard the police, the helicopters, everyone came. I jumped on Facebook Live pretty quickly just to tell people, hey, we're good. I just heard a noise. It's down the street. And that turned out to be the last night that everything kind of went down. And I was also telling Wes before we started that I kind of stumbled across a Reddit thread. Just, social media is so interesting when these things happen nowadays. But I stumbled across a Reddit thread where a supposed person saying that he's the Austin bomber had given a lot of details to the things that he had done recently. And then he deleted his account. And so it was actually an archive. And I don't know if police or whoever's looking at it, but I tweeted it and put it on Facebook pretty quickly. It's interesting how connected we are, but also, people always talk about the ills of social media, but in some ways, it was really good for this because it kind of kept us all connected to know what was happening.
Absolutely. Gosh. And then we've had headlines with Florida. We've talked on the show about student voice and the ways in which students have been so articulate to be able to advocate for change. And we've had some legislation pass. Interestingly, not a tech headline. We've got teachers about to walk out here in Oklahoma on April 2nd. Yeah, all of our public school teachers. We're basically 50th in the nation in teacher salaries. We can make about 20,000 more if we'll step on across the line into the Lone Star State. So
wow, I didn't know the difference in pay.
It's brutal.
Did y'all have students walk out on the 14th?
Well, we had a lot on spring break, but we did have some. So one of our daughters, who's a senior, it was on spring break, but the 8th grader was in class, and they had some folks speak, and it's really, boy, what a fascinating time. And then with all this Facebook stuff that's happened with Cambridge Analytica and the Russia probe and everything, I mean, oh my gosh, technology and social media has never been front and center in the news as much as it is today. So.
Yeah, what do you think about all that with the? So I saw the first report of the Cambridge Analytica stuff. It was pre-Facebook. It was a few days ago. It was about just kind of the background of the company itself, which I knew and kind of heard about. And it makes sense. You and I probably talk about this a lot about with people like big data is going to be the thing that helps education, right? It's going to let us know what kids are thinking and help them learn. And wow, well, it turns out a company's been doing this for quite a while, only with elections across the world. That was kind of interesting, and then Facebook's role in it, it's gotten pretty deep.
Absolutely. Well, we'll get into more of that as far as links. But back on March 22nd of 2017, in episode 44, we were talking about it, and I was just telling my wife and our girls at dinner tonight that, when we were talking about this, Jason and I were joking about needing to have tinfoil hats on and being the conspiracy theorists, because what we were reading and people were saying was that the Brexit vote, as well as the U.S. presidential election, may have been largely shifted and thrown by all of this targeted marketing that happened. And so I'm just very thankful for things to have come forward, for
for sure.
For a whistleblower to have come forward. So, but before we jump to those articles, gotta ask you about the Learning Festival. So for people who don't know, you're the father of the feast of iPad Palooza. I definitely, and we've talked to our daughter about this, Carl has been this theater guy who's found his niche in technology, and he's an amazing organizer. And now we have Tech Palooza. So for people who don't know, tell just a brief history of iPad Palooza and then where you guys are this year with the Learning Festival.
So we started in 2012, I believe. And the idea was, we just gotten one-to-one iPads. We wanted to have a way of teachers to share kind of ideas and resources. And we said, well, we'll do a little event and we'll call it like an iConference, which just sounded extremely boring. So one of my staff, Mariana Ricketson, actually came up with the title, and she said, what about like a Palooza? What about like a iPad Palooza? And I said, oh, that's perfect. So we ran with that, made a website, set a date, had no idea what we were going to do. Sometimes you got to do that too. You just go, we're going to take a chance and do this and see what happens. We got Tony Vincent to come and keynote. I convinced him to come at a pretty cheap rate because we had no money. And then a lot of people from around the area were like, well, hey, can we come? And I was like, sure, we'll do $50. We'll give you a free t-shirt and free barbecue. And it turned out like 450 people showed up, and most of it was our own staff. And then the next year was the year it really blew up, because I actually got a hold of Sir Ken Robinson's people. Was that the year you came, Wes? I'm trying to remember what year you came.
No, this is a great story. We came the year after.
Yeah, and so I was talking to his people, and it was in November, and I just started planning the next go around, and they said to me like, well, we've never, Ken's never heard of this. We've never heard. I was like, oh, you haven't heard of it? It's a global festival. It's 1,000 people, and it's amazing, and and they said okay, and I said, so will he do it? And they came back and said, yeah, he'll do it at his nonprofit price, which is still quite a bit. I won't say how much, but so sure enough, he agreed. We advertised him, and then 1,000 people showed up because he was there. So I wasn't lying. I was just predicting the future.
That's right.
And after that, it kind of blew up. We had Sugata Mitra. We had Eric Whitaker, the guy who does the global choir stuff, which is amazing. Last year we had Jason. Now his last name escaped me, and I've seen him like 1,000 times. He does all the National Geographic brain game shows. And then Felix has been there. You've been there. Lots of good EdTech friends from around a lot of them doing favors for me. David Jakes and George Kuros coming a couple times, and it's just been fun. It started out as a 1 day, it turned into 3 days, and then what happened, kind of, I noticed trending last year was the title, as fun as it was starting to become like have certain people feel like they weren't included because the word iPad was in the title, even though it wasn't about the device. So we pulled it back last year, and this year we're actually just calling it the Learning Festival, or LearnFest for short, which there is one in the UK that is not ours, and it happens to do more around business. So there's going to be some cross-branding issues there, I imagine. But for us, that was always the sub-theme of this anyway. It was never a conference. It was a learning festival. So we'll still have some of the fun and games. This year, just to tell your listeners, we're kind of doing it beta. We're going small again. We're going to about 400 people only. And we're not doing huge keynotes or anything. It's very ground level. I'm trying 2 new things that I've never seen ever done at an event ever, an educational event. One I've seen done at a music festival that I got an idea for. So I can't give you away what that is, because then everyone will steal it. But if you come this year, there's 200 seats open for the public. It's $100. We're doing it pretty cheap. Like I said, it's very beta, very granular. But then next year in 2019, we're going to bring it back big. And we still have the spin-offs. In fact, the one in Australia is now Tech Palooza. And that's in October. Y'all should all come to that if you can. It's just in Australia.
Absolutely.
It's an easy flight. Come on, 24 hours later. And you end up like 2 days behind where you were or ahead of where you were. But yeah, there's been still some fun spin-off events. And, Felix and I still plan a lot of things together. And he had, of course, Miami Device back in the day, which then became Shift and EDU after he left. So we still talk a lot. We have regular dinners on Friday nights with FaceTime family dinners. It's pretty fun.
You do? That's awesome.
Yeah.
You guys are amazing.
It's we still keep in touch that way. And then at ISTE this year, so you're talking about theater and events, and I know your daughter's in theater as well. We're doing a poetry slam. Last year we tried this at iPad Palooza, and at ISTE this year we're doing one. I got a bar that's willing to host us. It's about 150 people will do it. Be fairly exclusive, but I've got 12 of the biggest EdTech speakers you've ever heard of. I've convinced to get on stage for 3 minutes and poetry slam.
Oh,
so it's going to be different. But we're going to try it. So I just made the advertisement for it today, and I'll put that out there. And it'll, like I said, it's going to be fairly limited. But so if you're going to Chicago and ISTE, hit me up at Mr. Hooker, and I can probably get you an invite.
awesome. Well, Peggy George is live in our chat room. Shout out to Peggy, and she's dropped in the link. So thelearningfestival.com is the website to check out, and Twitter is the LearnFest. So big shout outs there, and that is awesome. We have a family wedding that is happening right around that time, but we'll have to see, because it's on a Wednesday through Thursday.
We're doing Wednesday, Thursday, the 13th, 14th, and then next year I think we're going to keep it around that week. We moved it up one year, last year, and it was too early. A lot of schools couldn't come. We've done it later, but it gets closer to ISTE, and I know that a lot of people like to go to ISTE. One of these years I might just be brazen and do it right when ISTE's happening, just to see who will come, but I don't want to get into that war yet.
Hey, you know what? It's different strokes for different folks, and there's different vibes,
for sure.
Different conferences, and so there's a lot to be said though for the smaller, place to network. And it's interesting.
Yeah.
I've been doing the iPad Media Camp for the last 5 summers, and this summer with my wife have decided to make it the Making Media Camp. A similar kind of thing. That there's so many different tools. I mean, my favorite tools for the iPad are Explain Everything and Book Creator, and both of those now we've been having teachers and students, on Chromebooks, because we're a mixed device environment. So I mean, the focus is on the learning, but of course devices matter, and we'll talk Apple and the Apple event a little bit here. But let's actually do an article, and then let's talk about South by, because you were there. So Ars Technica, March 18th, 2018. This is an amazing article. It's VR headsets have become the new art house, the best of South by Southwest fantastic VR festival. And the author goes through 5 different VR experiences, some of which are scientific, like Greenland and ice is melting, kinds of things. And others are, sci-fi mix, storytelling, but then others are kind of a walking the line between what we know about black holes and the creation of the universe and stars, but experiencing it. So what was South by Southwest like? I got to go to EDU a couple years ago, and I will say I felt more like bait, or more like I felt different than I had at any other tech conference. So were you at both EDU and the regular South by, and what was that like?
I didn't go to regular this year. Regular is about $1,500, which is a little bit out of my budget, but I've gone when I presented. You get a free badge. That's a great thing about South by. What I love, and I wish more conferences would do, is they always give their presenters free badges. So I've gone to EDU every year since its existence, and it started out as very much a small educationally focused K-12 event. And like you say, now it's almost like you got to be careful. There's a lot of sharks in the water with us. So there's a lot of venture capitalists, but there's also a lot of ed tech companies. I felt like it's almost, and I put this in my feedback with Ron Reed and the group, that it's almost too much of that now. We've almost gone away from K-12. I feel like K-12 is about a quarter of the audience, if I had to judge from what I saw from just walking around. Yeah, VR was huge. I'm actually wearing a Capital Factory shirt, which is right up the street downtown there from where South by takes place. And they have a beautiful VR lab that I've started taking teachers and students to. And they just, we're actually scoping out and building a VR lab in our middle school in the next, probably, we might get it done by the end of the school year, if not for next year for sure. And it's just a little 10 by 10, 12 by 12 space that we're going to have kids actually design their own and code in Unity to build their own worlds. And these are middle schoolers, which is crazy because I can't code in Unity.
And Unity is a VR authoring environment.
Yeah, coding language that they basically use for a lot of the gaming software uses it. And so we've been taking kids there quite a bit, and teachers, just to see their feedback. In fact, one of the ones that we looked at was that the tilt brush, which I think you mentioned on Twitter. It was just amazing.
That right there is the reason we are going to get one at our house because my 14-year-old is just into art so much.
Crazy.
And you see that I mean, in the same way Minecraft blows your mind, thinking about Lego brick building with unlimited Lego bricks, right? It's just like, what are you going to do? Thinking about unlimited painting in 2 and 3 dimensions with any medium, my mind explodes.
The one thing they did that was really neat in this space was they actually had some background music. So we put our art teachers on the devices, and this one art teacher, first-year teacher, but she's really good, really engaging, likes to try new things with technology. She put on the goggles, and we had this music going, and it was like a dance. It was really surreal. She was dancing and painting at the same. We could see what she was doing. She takes off the goggles, and I look at her eyes, and she's crying. And I said, "What's the matter?" And she's like, she was moved to tears because she's so into art that she just loved the experience of being kind of surrounded by it. And I thought, that's just incredible. I wish I would recorded that. Just her reaction to me was amazing.
We had a festival at our school last year. We were a part of an independent school association in the Southwest, and there were over 3,000 students and teachers, and it was the 50th anniversary of this arts festival. And it's in April. Of course, we were all praying for no tornadoes, and we all survived. Yeah. But they did have a student do a VR demo, which I unfortunately didn't get to visit and see. And I was so glad for that to be there because this is the future. And I know that we have the cutting edge, and I've seen the augmented reality stuff, and some of that really just seems like, okay, that's fancy candy, bells and whistles, but not really transformative. But when you think about immersive storytelling and the creation of art, and some of those things I've seen with Tilt Brush, and I put that link in, it's tiltbrush.com. I mean, go watch that video if you haven't seen just the overview. I mean, it's more than, hey, this dragon is now, virtually in 3 dimensions breathing fire above my homework assignment because of the authorship. I mean, that's the thing that's so exciting to me is the idea of students and all of us being able to be creators in the media, not just the passive consumers. I mean, that can be cool too.
I'll put a link in here to the one that kind of drew me to it, because I know in that link you're talking about with the kind of the film experience. I don't know if you've heard or seen the film Clouds Over Sidra. It's about a refugee camp, and it's amazing. I mean, it's crazy to me. I guess the director, he set up these cameras in these different places and where there's refugee camps, and he filmed just at a 360-degree perspective, a little short film, and it's just a documentary. And you can watch this on a flat screen and see it and be, that's kind of sad and tragic. But what he did is he went to the UN and he gave it to a lot of the world leaders and put their goggles on, and they had to walk around and look and listen and hear. And you almost, you can't smell, but you can see the dirt on these kids, like crowded in little classrooms, and just kind of experience it from their point of view. It was powerful. A lot of them really changed their mindset of what was happening in terms of the refugee camps right there in the Middle East. So it was a powerful one. I'll link that in the notes. But I think movie making, I've been saying this for years, and I've even blogged about it. Like in 2012, I said, I predict there'll be a time in our future where we all go to the movies. We'll still all go to an event together, but we'll all put on our goggles, and so we can hear each other, but we want to experience it too. And then you'll almost watch a movie. George Lucas would love this. He'll recreate Star Wars 15 different ways, but you can almost watch a movie from the character perspective, or from the idea of, now I'm Han Solo and I want to turn to my right and see what Chewie's saying to me. But then the next time I do the film, maybe I'll do it as Chewie and see what he's looking. It's just going to be. You're gonna have lots of cameras for that, but I mean, I can see a future where that'll happen.
Wow. Well, we tried. No, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was gonna say at South by there was definitely a lot of those little closets and lounges and booths. I say closets; they look like little rooms that they had already set up. So you would walk by one, and it was funny because it was always the same kind of dance. You'd see people in there doing this weird thing with their hands, and you didn't know what they were doing, but interacting with some space. And so it's kind of neat to see that kind of invading that event. I like that idea of that interactive kind of a lounge.
Peggy dropped a link in. Best Buy has the Merge VR goggles on sale now for $20. I guess they're originally $50. So that's pretty cool. And we tried at school. We have a big service learning emphasis, and high school students have to get so many service learning hours. And we've tried with that Clouds Over Sidra, which is a phenomenal VR. But I mean, just technically from a facilitating standpoint, the download's over a gig. And so you've got to have students get that downloaded on their device or have devices for them, and so that's one of the things I'm considering. I don't know if this will happen, but if we could have the funding, I found there's several companies that will rent to you like a VR classroom goggle set. So you could have it for like 2 weeks or something. And so we could set it up where we did some, field trips with service learning or social studies or history or something. And then we also, we're over in art and we did some stuff, that was artistic. But I need to get into that myself, I think, and play in the sandbox and find some others who are doing it. But I definitely, this is just personal, but as far as my own children and seeing the artistic future of that, you really can glimpse, I think, transformative, big scale change that is coming, and it's pretty mind blowing. So it's one of those things you got to get your head around. But
I think the good news for us is that the cost. Obviously, you just mentioned the cost drawdowns, which is a pretty big one that's out there now. I'll link it in there in the show notes. But it's the HTC comes up with this device. It's been for years. You had to have this big, giant, kind of bulky box that you had to run the thing on, and the VR labs that I visited, that's what they have. But now they're becoming more mobile, so they're wireless. The controllers can really connect to a laptop. That's about all the laptops are so powerful now. So you really talk about a mobile set. You don't need to have the big space anymore. You can just have, you want to be safe and not be bumping into furniture and things. But you just have the headset with the handsets, and then it kind of triangulates your position off of the laptop, and you're able to kind of move around a room that way. It's pretty amazing to see how quickly it's come. Those are still pretty expensive. I think they're like $500 for the really good ones.
Right.
But just doing programming and that, one of the games I played and that we all played, it was called Face Your Fears. And even though it's digital, your mind still believes it. And I went to this one, I clicked on one of the fears that was called fear of heights. And you're in this apartment about 90 stories up, and you're looking out a window. It's just a movie. You can't really interact much. This robot comes out of the window, this giant, like almost like a Godzilla-like robot, smashes the window, grabs you, and pulls you out of the window. You look down, and you see 90 stories below you. And I had to sit down. I was getting some nerve, and I'm not even afraid of heights. And this is cartoonish still. So imagine in 5 years when it's real. I mean, your brain still can't, it's interesting that my brain couldn't distinguish reality. It just felt so real.
Well, we're, Google Home Mini users now with the Google Assistant. Yeah. And so the thing we've discovered is, thunderstorm sounds, which there's all kinds of ways to make these relaxing sounds and whatnot. But, your brain, your eyes are closed. You don't know if it's real or not. It might as well be, you have a thunderstorm all night. And anyway, yes. That's a very small level of that. But there's a lot there. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about the Apple event, and then maybe we'll talk we will talk Facebook and Cambridge Analytica and stuff. So Apple has an event coming up next Tuesday on the 27th. 2 articles we dropped in. Ars Technica on March 16th says students and teachers are the focus of Apple's surprise March 27th event, and it talks about that it's going to be in a Chicago school. And then the Washington Post just a couple days ago on March 20th has the article, Apple is fighting to regain its position in America's classrooms. Now that one has statistics, especially about Google, about Chromebooks, about Microsoft, and certainly Apple's market share dominated by the iPhone and its consumer focus. But we don't want anybody in the podcast to disclose anything that they cannot disclose. But I'll say, as a tech director, that I was thrilled for the price educationally for the iPad to come down when it bumped to generation 5 with 32 gig, right? Yeah. That's the first time I'd ever seen that happen. We are a mixed environment with Chromebooks, with MacBook Airs, basically for all of our faculty. We got a few Windows users out there, but we're very invested, and we've got about 120 iPads now under management in shared situations. We're not one-to-one, but anyway, I was very excited by that. And so I'm hopeful, that their tools of management are going to continue to evolve. But I'll say, I don't predict that Apple is going to fundamentally change focus in terms of, or the way that they handle it with mobile device management. Some people are surprised that, yes, you have got to pay a separate company for mobile device management. And it's absolutely worth, in what I've seen, every penny, because it would just be crazy not to utilize that. So I guess I'm expecting them to, possibly have maybe some less expensive iPads and some new, I don't know, they haven't done an event since 2012 with iBooks, I guess. And so perhaps there's going to be some other kinds of things with content in Apple Classroom. But of course, one of the challenging things that happens is, the cross-platform stuff.
Yeah.
And so we've got Putnam City Schools here. We have a tech director breakfast that happens every month. I mean, the number of iPads, I think you're probably in this boat. Like they've got 18,000 or just some crazy, number of devices. And so they're heavily invested in that platform. And so putting content into iBooks or using iBooks Author, it looks different in that kind of a situation than a more mixed environment. So, Carl, any thoughts on Apple and what we're, what we're seeing happening in the marketplace, and really where you guys are too, as a district with your iPads, because you're in the sixth year of one-to-one. How far down are you guys?
Yeah, we did. So we started one-to-one in 2011. So I guess we're getting into the end of our 7th year, maybe end of our 6th full year. And we did a refresh about 2 years ago. And it was, and we put them all out there. We put Chromebooks out there because at the time when we started our one-to-one, there were no Chromebooks. You had like some sort of weird Dell flat screen tablet thing that doesn't exist anymore, and that was about it for tablets. And so we went iPad one-to-one. It was iPad 2s, 16 gig. Ooh, those things were dinosaurs, but they had a camera, so it was kind of neat, and we could do some stuff with them, which was great. And then they quickly died out. And so when we did the refresh, the big thing for a lot of our students, secondary students, was getting a keyboard case. So yeah, you're right. When Apple dropped the price, that was huge for us because we were able to afford a pretty nice keyboard for all of our secondary students. Still looking for like the ideal case, because even the one we got, I like it, but it's got some failures with hinges and things. Anyway, I won't get into that. But at some point, I'm still waiting for like the holy grail of iPad case, but I haven't found it yet. So we're doing now iPad Air 2, 64 gig, a lot more memory, all the way through K to 12, 8,000 of those. And then I think we have 14,000 devices total in our district. When you consider laptops, we went one-to-one MacBook Airs for all of our staff this last year. We have Apple TVs in every classroom. So it's really amazing to see when you actually go all Apple, the ecosystem, and how much of a difference it makes for like, even our teachers. I remember like within a month, I knew it was a big success when a teacher called me and said, I can't project my MacBook. And I said, what's the matter? She's like, AirPlay doesn't seem to work right now. And I was like, well, like less than a month ago, you were plugging into a wall to do that. She's like, I was like, yes, you could still do that. But they'd already forgotten. They love the wireless environment. So teachers have already moved their desks out of the front. They're in the center of the room. They're all around. Kids are projecting things on the screen. I say having all of that, I'm wishing we would have done that a lot earlier, but it's definitely helped. It's been a lot more transformative.
Couple of questions on that'll be technical, but are they doing over Wi-Fi or Bluetooth connections to Apple TVs?
So we have our Apple TVs all hardwired with Ethernet. And they are on Wi-Fi, but it's all the Bluetooth. It's the newer gens, the 4th gens Apple TVs. So Bluetooth does the handshake, and it's been really stable. Having the network connection hardwired helps. We got that from a district in Deer Park outside of Houston that told us that trick. And like, if you have the Bluetooth connection to do kind of the connect part at the beginning, and then you go just hardwired into the network, you're going to be a lot more successful. And we have been with that. And it's geo-based, so you can only see like the 3 in your area, because it's like Bluetooth, so you can only get 30 or 50 feet on that, which is nice. You don't have some random kid projecting across at a different...
Right.
Not that we've ever had this happen, but maybe a middle school kid may have once AirPlayed something in the elementary classroom.
Yes.
So that part's been really slick. And it's been very stable. The latest update messed us up a little bit, the latest Apple TV update. So now we have to throw that into the mix. Now we get the lovely tvOS update tied with iOS and macOS. But
absolutely.
It happens on all platforms. So
sure, it does. It does.
And we're a Google district too. So it's we've been Google since we got the iPads, to be honest. So we're kind of in both worlds. So for the Apple event, they've been really pushing lately. If you look in the last year and a half where they've been going with education, they've had some changes up at the top with some leadership roles there. And I think Catherine Hughes is out of your area. She's actually in Oklahoma. Yeah.
She was with Apple and came to Oklahoma City Public Schools, did a few things, back to Apple. So, and she's a top dog now, I think, one of the upper.
She's the head of K-12, I think, or K-20, I think is what they call it, something like that, across the country. So she's a part of that group, and she's really she came down and talked to us and spoke at our campus, really down to earth, and really like wants to figure out how can Apple get reinvested. So yeah, thank you Google for dropping the prices, but also thank you Google for getting Apple back into the mix. Because I mean, you and I probably remember this when they used to be at every conference, lots of teacher door prizes, things like that, just giving things away to teachers and being a real big part of it. And then in like 2001, they kind of just disappeared. So it's nice to have them kind of back in the mix. They've been at ISTE the last few years doing their little playgrounds, which is good. So I think for this event, from what I've heard, and I'll have friends that are there in Chicago, they're actually going to be there in person. So I'm excited about that. But I think it's going to be less hardware, honestly. I think it's going to be a lot more software. So
well,
iTunes U.
I saw, won't go into details, but maybe there's some tech companies. We know this as tech directors that approach us and ask us things.
Yeah.
Seesaw has been a big part of what has been happening in our elementary in terms of lots of buy-in and utilization of the iPad and just a lot of parent communication. And so I think that it's the common denominator. You need to have that platform. So hopefully, and Google Classroom has its purpose. It's still schooly. So it'll be interesting to see how Apple enters into the mix of having a place like a learning journal where you can stash stuff, where you can pull that up at a conference. And then the degree to which it is learning management system, LMS, Feely, or whether it is more on the digital portfolio, learning journal side. And so we've used Seesaw the last 2 summers with iPad Media Camp, and I should go back and get the statistics. I know this sounds really difficult, but Shelley and I were in Jackson Hole, Wyoming at the amazing Jackson High School for an iPad Media Camp. And the number of artifacts which 40 teachers created in the space of 3 days was just astronomical, right? And so facilitating that ease of, I turn this into you, you share it back to me, we can have, conversations back and forth. Yep. That is a key need that we have in the classroom, whether it is Seesaw or something else. So it'll be.
I get the alert from my daughter's 3rd grade teacher on my watch now that like, oh, your daughter submitted work to Seesaw. So
really,
I know. Yeah, it's pretty cool to see it on that end.
That's cool.
My wife's sitting across from me, and she just told me that my daughter's report card just came in straight A's, is what she just sent a note to me. So that's good. Yay, Sophia.
I haven't made the smartwatch jump yet, but I'm still considering. So not yet.
Well, so telling you about the Ring camera, to go goober geeky here for a second. The Ring cam that we just installed now, it actually alerts my watch. So whenever my wife leaves or our neighbors leave, I'm like, my watch is thumping left and right. So if you're one that doesn't like the digital distractions, or what I call notifistrations, a combination of notifications and distractions, you don't want one because it'll distract you a lot. I turn most of mine off, to be honest, just because I like to focus and kind of have some mindfulness. So to the Apple thing, back to that again, just I think software is going to be the big thing. I wish they would come out with maybe a 250-ish iPad, or maybe even a MacBook that's an 11-inch, kind of bring those back. They're doing a lot of rebranding with their name. And if you look at their company right now, iTunes is actually disappearing. It's called Apple Music, right? And then they're getting and the Apple Watch is not an iWatch; it's an Apple Watch. So you'll notice some slight rebranding. My guess is they're going to do a little bit of that too. So iBooks may just become, books by Apple, and then iTunes itself, since it's going away, it could be something different. Apple University, I don't know that part of it, but my guess is it's going to be along that end. And I know that they're doing a lot of investigative work on iTunes U in terms of like, how can that be a better game changer? Because we use Google Classroom 5 to 12, and we use Shobi and Seesaw a little bit K to 4, but Google Classrooms, like you said, it's schooly, to use your phrase. But
guess what? We're in school.
It works.
That's right.
And it works.
It does.
And the kids actually like it because it's very simple and easy, and they get their notifications and they're happy and they go on, with their life. But so I think that's what we'll see. I'm predicting in 4 or 5 days from now.
One related article I'll drop in. This was from EdWeek Market Brief on February 26th. Pearson set to sell K-12 curriculum business, but not assessment. And so that's kind of interesting and a sign of the times that where's the money? It's in the assessment that we're going to continue to mandate for states. But certainly when it comes to iPad 1-to-1 and thinking about Apple and things that have happened, relationships with Pearson and curriculum are pretty, an important part of that whole landscape. And so do you guys publish and share like what you what you're buying in terms of curriculum? Because I think that's a key tech director and curriculum director question. Like, there's so much free, there's so much available, but what is worth paying? Because everybody wants to just, it's only $2 a user, it's only this, but you add all that up.
That's the ship. I honestly, I mean, it's all available. It's all public record, but I don't know of any district that actually says, here's every dollar we spend. However, like in our state, we have something called the instructional materials allotment, which does a monthly report that says what every single district has in that fund. And it's an allotment that we all get. And it's supposed to go toward instructional materials. They just added the word technology instructional materials to it, because what happened in our state was 93% of the money went toward traditional textbooks, and 7% went toward technology. So this big fund that was supposed to fund everything ended up funding just textbooks. And even in our own district, where we're fighting for a lot of OER, and OER still, even though it's free, it comes with some cost, right? You have to kind of manage it a little bit. But we spend an inordinate amount of money on textbooks that are hard and clunky. They're by the known publishers, including one you just mentioned, and generally they tend to not work well. Even on Chromebooks or iPads, that sometimes there's something, the Java doesn't work on a Chromebook, or the Flash part that they want to do doesn't work on an iPad. So I think there's a big push that's about to happen, and we're getting it in our district too, where it's no longer the tech department fighting with curriculum. I think it's more like the curriculum is now starting to fight with the technology, because it's so clunky and far behind. We're giving them all the devices and we get them access to it, but if the curriculum doesn't work, I spend hours, I don't know if you do this too, but at the beginning of the year, in the middle of the year, and the end of the year, just assessing, like, what are we using? How often are we using it? I started working with a startup company called Catch On about 2 years ago, just to get analytics that was just easy to find, so I could see it on my phone. Like, my God, we have all this money that we're spending. What are we using? You said $2 a kid. That's great. Are we using it? And if we aren't,
right,
should we train on it, or should we dump it?
Right.
Too many districts just keep saying, well, we'll re-up because so and so down the hallway uses this app, so we better keep using it.
Right.
But that's really not good. That's not a good steward of money, especially in Oklahoma, where you guys are really getting shortchanged a lot of ways. You got to figure out how to use that money well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, one other article, which is Apple related, 9 to 5 Google on March 20th, 2018, Alphabet bumped to third as Amazon becomes second most valuable company in the world. So Apple continues to hold the number one spot, but Alphabet, the parent company of Google, has gone to number 3. So we've been talking a lot about artificial intelligence and smart assistants and things like that. I don't know if you know this, but I actually switched to an Android phone in November before I went to Egypt, which is kind of a test. I mean, it's 100.
Text me green text instead of blue text. Now I know.
At school, hey, practically, I missed some texts from some of our folks that were texting me with iMessage, and that wasn't a good thing. So it's been a little bit rocky. It was it's $140 Moto E4 phone. And anyway, it was an experiment, but I said, my daughters panicked, right? They said, the world is ending, what are you going to do? I said, you're going to get my old phone. It's okay. But
oh, they're fine then.
Yeah, for now. But they're like, Dad, are you going to, come back? But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say Amazon's pretty in the news news here in Austin. And I don't know if you guys are one of the cities, but there's been this big push about their HQ2, right? Where's it gonna end up?
Right.
And for a long time, Austin was odds-on favorite. So there were some theories that the Austin bomber was actually someone that was against it, trying to scare off Amazon and all this other stuff.
Oh, wow.
But I don't think that's come out.
Have any
I don't know that we're even
motives come out for that, by the way, that people?
Oh, the only one I haven't seen any motives except for the one I read on Reddit, which was, where he was saying he just wanted to watch the world burn, which 23-year-old kid, and even all of his neighbors have come out and said, like, well, he's, normal kid, quiet, he's here, it's the same thing. He's a quiet kid. He seemed nice and we never expected, and and they've got his roommates detained right now. They've had him for about over a day. So who knows what's going on there, but
wow.
Well, I imagine it'll all kind of come forward here pretty soon. Anyway, back to the Amazon thing. So we're an Alexa family. I know you're Google, and it's been an interesting experiment, I would say, educationally, because my daughters are I guess they're 5, 6, and 9, and a couple of them with speech has been a little bit of a struggle, admittedly. And so to have Alexa in the house, it's been pretty powerful. In fact, my wife and I went on a trip not too long ago, and I don't know if you know this, but it captures everything, right? Everything, when you say Alexa, it actually records.
Well, and we actually should say the Miss A, for fairness of those who may be playing this aloud. So that's that anyway. But yeah, happens. Sometimes there's going to be an automatic podcast filter, because we don't, unless something weird happens, we don't edit that out of the show. But at some point, that's going to be Wes predicts that'll be an AI feature of podcast processing. Is it will automatically detect if you've said the magic words, and then it will, insert.
Oh, that would be so. In a podcast, I could say, yeah,
right.
Alexa, play. Yeah, no, see, so I just did that. Now someone's going to know their Alexa's about to go off.
Madame A. No,
Madame A.
We had the articles a couple of weeks ago or last week about Madame A laughing unexpectedly, and so they changed, I guess, the algorithm. Did that happen?
Yeah.
Where you got some weird laughter?
She just starts cackling, and we were like, "What is she?" And then we asked to put something on the grocery list, and she went into this whole thing about a news story, and I was like, "Where are you reading? You're not even listening to us anymore." But it's been interesting because she does. I will say that with my daughters, like I said, to go back and listen to those recordings, it's funny to hear them try to get her to play Taylor Swift, "Look What You Made Me Do," which seemed to be the song they wanted to hear 1,000 times. And so when we were on this trip, my mother-in-law was watching them, and I go, "Let's just pull up Alexa and see what's going on." And sure enough, there it is. And then you could hit play and hear their voice as they try to enunciate it, because they're struggling with it. It was a Alexa, not Alex. They didn't say the actual word, and so getting her to recognize it, it's kind of neat to see it helping with speech in some ways.
Well, and I think I'm going to try for this. We sold back some laptops and have some funds that we hopefully can use for this. It won't be too expensive, but I want to offer up a chance. And again, this is not official, so if anybody's listening, this is going to have to get this.
Wes said it. It's going to happen.
But just like buy 10 Google Assistants and minis, and then ask teachers, how might you use this? Because it is really a concrete way to see the progress of artificial intelligence, the march of artificial intelligence, and the Harry Potter-like world we live in, where, if you have to say the algorithm correctly in the right order in order to get that stuff to happen. And so I think it will be more of kind of a fun sort of thing. But, with iPads, my wife is teaching 3rd grade, and her kids love to get help with spelling words and, use different kinds of voice to speech. And that's something that not everybody realizes, but that's part of this transition, right? As we've gone from the mouse, the graphical user interface, to this touch environment. And now increasingly we're able to use our voice and get our house to do things, and eventually things.
Star Trek 4. Remember when they went back to San Francisco and Scotty pulls up the mouse and is like, "Oh, I got to actually type on this computer," because he's talking, "Hello, computer, make this." And you're like, "Yeah, that'll never happen." Well, now it's happening. I mean, that was 1986, so it's kind of crazy how Hollywood predicts it. With my own kids, with the speech to text part of it has been pretty powerful with iPads, and I showed it to some parents today because they didn't even know that was in there. And my daughter was struggling with some writing, and she has these great stories in her head, but to actually put pencil to paper and write it down was a struggle. So I had her voice to text into like Pages or something, and then kind of expand that text a little bit so she could see it and then copy it down. And she didn't do it a lot, just a few times, but it was just enough to get her kind of over that hump of like, okay, let me get the story out of my head and then I can transcribe it onto paper. And now she's doing fine. But it was nice to have those assistants in there. And we didn't have that when you and I were kids.
Oh gosh. No.
We wanted a fancy technology. It was like a 3D glasses looking at a comic book. That was like the most amazing technology we could look at. Or Mr. Rogers.
I remember Merlin. Did you have that little battery operated thing, or Little Professor? These were the
oh yeah. Oh, the one that was like a speak and spell. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yep.
Simon. Okay, we got to talk Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. So there's a slew of articles in here. I'm going to just share a couple headlines. Oh my gosh. So Mark Zuckerberg finally came out and posted on Facebook yesterday on March 21st about the Cambridge Analytica breach. What has happened? A whistleblower from a company called Cambridge Analytica, which worked to both support the Trump campaign and the Brexit campaign in Europe, has been accused of basically taking the data out of Facebook in legitimate ways, but then using it in illegitimate ways. So it wasn't a breach, but an academic had written these quizzes for Facebook. Hey, I don't know that this was the quiz, but what house would you be in if you were in Harry Potter, or personality inventories and things like that. And what happened was, when you took that quiz, you agreed to terms that not only gave them access to all of your Facebook data, but your friends' data as well. And so they were able to accumulate tons of data on maybe 50 million or so folks just in the United States and other places. So EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, published on March 19th, how to change your Facebook settings to opt out of platform API sharing. Facebook did, turn things down in terms of that kind of access to friends of friends data, and they made it harder for developers. But anyway, there is a ton of information, and we've been talking about this for years, that, we are the product of Facebook, right? I mean, our data is what is being sold. And so Wired has a very good article called "A Hurricane Flattens Facebook" on March 20th. The Guardian's video, which is actually the interview with the whistleblower, I'd really commend that. That's from March 17th. Cambridge Analytica whistleblower, we spent $1 million harvesting millions of Facebook profiles. And the interesting thing is, we've had Cambridge Analytica representatives testify in Europe, in the UK, saying, no, we didn't. We've had Steve Bannon, who was like the director of Cambridge Analytica, announcing, no, we didn't have this data. And so we're going to see some testimony pretty soon, most likely, I think, from probably Zuckerberg, not only in the United States before Congress, but, in Europe. News company Shift has an article, and it's more just for who wrote it than the source, but it's from John Battelle, and he says, "We allowed this to happen. We're sorry. We need your help." He was basically forecasting what he thought Zuckerberg should say when he finally spoke, because Zuckerberg hadn't said anything for about 5 days.
Right.
Until he's spoken out about this. And then I really like this CNET article from yesterday, March 21st. Facebook isn't a community, it's a weapon. And I'm going to read just a couple lines and then see what you're thinking, Carl. He said, "Mark Zuckerberg doesn't understand Facebook. He doesn't understand what it's become. He refers to it constantly as a community, which is terrifying. 2.2 billion people use Facebook. That's 31% of the global population. Facebook is not a community. It's a world-changing paradigm with the potential to profligate," there's a great Scrabble word for you, "the agendas of the rich and powerful. It's a platform where users are profiled and then targeted in election campaigns. It's a place where fake news is shared and digested without penalty. It's a place where one presidential candidate can be charged less for ads because they're controversial and generate more clicks on the site." So were you aware of Cambridge Analytica, Carl, before the last week? And what are your thoughts about all of this?
Well, first of all, I'm Gryffindor is my house, just to answer that question of that quiz.
And we're a Gryffindor fan.
And Hufflepuff for my daughters, but yeah. So we're guilty of taking those same quizzes that we did on Facebook too. So I'm sure I've given them lots of my data. I'd heard of Cambridge Analytica, and it may have been from the Bannon stuff way back when, because I know that he'd worked with them, and I kind of follow a little bit of the politics. I try not to get too crazily involved with it. And then it was before the Facebook stuff had come out. It was right before spring break. I think it was early March, that an investigative reporter had kind of disguised himself as a person from Sri Lanka who was going to go in and hire Cambridge Analytica to say, how would you help my candidate win their campaign? To which they basically went into detail about, and it was a series of really great videos. It's only about 8 or 9 minutes. I don't know if you have it in the links. I'll see if I can find it, but it doesn't get into the Facebook stuff as much, like I say, but essentially we're going to use social media. We're going to program, bots, which we all know are out there now. We've all kind of seen them. I don't know how many people still realize that, but they're still, they're everywhere. When the Austin bombing stuff happened, there were bots popping in left and right on that, just taking advantage of it. And they use a combination of bots, but also real people to flood social media, Facebook and Twitter, to try to curb things with these elections. And in some cases, they were even like talking about getting a politician to say something and then taking that soundbite and then spinning it into an article, and then having all the little news bots kind of retweet it or respin it. So someone makes something up, and then other people kind of vet it by saying, yeah, it really happened when it didn't really. So I heard that, and that kind of jarred me. I kind of knew that was happening, but again, and then the tide of Facebook has just been mind-blowing. And also, I think Mark Zuckerberg said as his resolution for 2018, wasn't it something like, we're going to clean this up? Like, he even knew. Right. No, they said there was testimony before Congress in like November, December. It wasn't Zuckerberg, and it wasn't the heads of Google, heads of Twitter. They sent their lawyers basically and some of their PR people to Congress. But yes, Zuckerberg announced changes to the news feed, which was going to supposedly emphasize things that your friends and your family shared versus news that organizations shared. I mean, part of the big issue here, right, is bad actors. How does anyone identify a bad actor and flag them? And also, this goes to the core of what Facebook is and what they're doing. So is there a way forward for them to stop
a quote bad actor who wants to manipulate an election or throw something else, shift perceptions about something. How can that happen? With the platform as it is now. Have you done any ads like for any of your events and stuff on Facebook, Carl, to basically get the marketing side?
I've never done the boosted ads. I've done pages and set those up. And I saw Q, which is in California, this last week, had a whole lot of had a bunch of Facebook Live, which I thought was really innovative. And in terms of I would see it come up on my feed. They'd be doing interviews with people in a little booth. And I was like, what a great way to just use that part of it for educational purposes. But yeah, I've never used the boost ad feature. That said,
I did a little of that a couple years ago. When I was doing iPad things. Well, it was crazy. I mean, the way in which you could say, hey, I want to target people who like education and Apple within a certain mile radius of Oklahoma City, and just getting very granular about, and then it would show you how many people met that criteria, and then you could buy the ads, in order to show them to that group. In fact, it would be an absolutely fascinating and probably important thing for, I don't know if you do this in economics class, certainly if there's any kind of marketing class where somebody's talking about that, but it's actual digital citizenship too, because when you get into that, and you don't have to buy an ad to see this, right? You can just go in and talk about, I think I want to place an ad. And these tools are available to everybody. That's why this wasn't a quote hack. They were, Russia as well as Cambridge and whoever else was paying them, were using Facebook as it has been created to be used. There was a violation apparently of the terms of use of the data when that data was collected. But that's why this really goes to the heart of this model that Facebook has ridden up to this point. And I think the question of whether regulation will happen, and whether people are going to get upset enough to force regulation. And I know Silicon Valley is really scared of that. But I think I'm siding today with those that say Facebook, they can't regulate themselves. But there's also Google that falls into this, and a whole lot of other companies, right, that rely on ad revenue. And whenever we say regulation, we know that government and bureaucracy is going to be multiple steps behind where technology is. And so there's a lot of risk in throwing, whether we're talking about net neutrality or anything else, talking about regulation,
charging for the internet.
Are we going to break stuff? I mean, or are you going to break the internet? Are you going to really chill innovation? What are you going to do when you try to help? So,
is it that whole too big to fail? From the banks from back in the day, right? Is that the case with Facebook now? I mean, that quote you read was pretty powerful, because you're right. The fact that he thinks it's a community is kind of funny, laughable when you think about the 2.2 billion people that are in it.
Well, see, he took that tour all over the country. Oklahoma was, I think, the last state, and he saw some wind farms that we have, and he sat down and had dinner with people, and they had their cameras. And part of what he was amazed is how many civic groups people were in, they went to church and they were in clubs, and he came out of the clouds of Silicon Valley into America. And I mean, I had heard at one point people thinking he was going to make a run for president and all of this. And, it's really, we're going to see some pivotal things, I think, happen with Facebook in the next couple weeks, because the way they handle or mishandle this is going to, it could have big ripple effects. I mean, certainly, remember MySpace? Do you still have an account on MySpace?
Yeah, I still get an email from an old email from that, topic ban.
But we can all abandon if we would want to, and that can happen.
I think I was going to ask you, are you seeing that? Because I'm seeing on Twitter, I've started to notice it. There's actually celebrities and some I guess I would say, political pundits or journalists, but also friends of mine that are now saying, okay, we're abandoning Facebook, and they're going to Twitter. Which maybe just be changing one for the other. Although Twitter is a little bit different, obviously, the way it works. It's not quite the same platform. But and then the post you shared about how to kind of change some of your API and what's connecting. I was surprised even with Twitter. I went into it last week. Someone griped about my little tweet map thing that comes out, and I forget how I signed up for that. And they're like, you can turn that off. And I was like, oh yeah. So I guess it's kind of annoying. I'll turn it off. I don't really care. I'll go turn it off. There was over 120 different things that were accessing my Twitter account. And I was like, wow, I haven't looked at this in ever, I don't think ever.
Well, and that is an important, there's important security, digital citizenship conversations, because if we're using another platform to authorize access, we are trusting. In fact, there was a Twitter app on Apple TV, and I didn't install it because there were not any reviews. And if I would log into Twitter and grant that developer access to my account, there's a whole trust and permissions issue there.
Yeah.
So people have, we're doing, two-step verification for all of our faculty and staff now at school with Google. That took a year of, encouragement
We're in the middle of
and
that.
training.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. And so that, and that may or may not be viable in all circumstances, depending on how well cell signals and your buildings and things and where you're at. I was visiting with, Jen last week on the show, and they're, it just depends on your circumstance. But the idea of two-step, is important. But what have you granted access to your credentials? And those of us that are early adopters and whatever with these tools, it may be a long list of, oh yeah, I forgot about.
Gotta clean up.
Exactly.
There's gonna be that's the next big thing, right? There'll be the service that comes out that says we're going to scrub your. They already have scrubbers out there that do it for kids that are going to college, like digital scrubbers that'll clean out their profiles and say like, here's your SEO, here's your digital brand marketing. What was it used to be? Not Q score, but there used to be a little rating that we would get based on the amount of followers. I can't remember what it was now. Some metric that people used to share. It was like not about me, but one of those things. And I can see that happening with us too, where we'll go back and say, oh, we have to clean up our profiles because we left a trail of. I mean, people are physically dying, dead, and they still are alive technically because their accounts continue to live on for. We're zombies now.
To tie it back to bots and that whole thing, I remember cluster maps, which I don't really use that much or whatever. But back in the day, bots, and this is even like with the K-12 online conference, we would look at that as metrics. Oh, look at that. Look how many visitors. Amazing, but the number of bots that were driving that, and it's almost like some of my self-esteem of, oh, look at the impact we're doing. But really, how many? I mean, it has been great. It's been phenomenal. But we couldn't look at that map of dots and say those were all human beings because there's a large number of bots. And that's true of Twitter as well, right? They've been trying to cull through the accounts and, deleting and stuff like that. And there's all kinds of good digital citizenship stuff to talk about because part of this is accountability and anonymous accounts. And are you going to allow those? And on the one hand, you might think, oh, that sounds great. Let's make everybody put their their DNA sample, like do your blood sample into your computer or whatever. You wouldn't do that, but driver's license for social. But then, if you're in Bahrain or you're in Qatar or you're in Iran or North Korea, maybe not North Korea because they may not be online, but if you're in a country with the being able to anonymously utilize the web, being able to, use social networks, all of that is really important, especially in extreme authoritarian, dictatorial type environments. Even Egypt, dare I say that, because the words we say can be transcribed and and
you'll see it. You'll see yourself in about 2 years with that statement, right? He'll come out and look at what Wes said 2 years ago. I think it's interesting, just kind of wrap up on that point. We haven't talked about drones much, but I know that here I just did a civics lesson. Actually, a friend of mine, Rich Lombardo, did this in one of the classes. He invited me down to a middle school class. And we went down and looked at it, and he flew his little bug drones. It's really tiny. Put on the goggles, showed it to the kids. They got to see themselves on the screen as it flew around the classroom. And we had it was just a little hook, and then we had a whole discussion about legality, about what does this mean civic wise in terms of drones and privacy. Like, so you build a treehouse in your backyard, and you can look over your neighbor's fence. Is that illegal? Well, what about flying a drone up and looking over your neighbor's fence? And it was really an interesting thing. And we talked about the goods and the bads of that technology too, and what it does for privacy. Because there's going to be a time where I think we could look up and I have a DJI Standard 3 that I love to fly around. But in probably 5 years from now, there may be, cameras everywhere. The fact that this bomber guy went so far without getting caught on camera was kind of amazing to me because, like I said, we're installing cameras on our house and we're going to have drones flying all over. At some point, physical privacy is going to be pretty hard to find, I think.
There was an article.
Much less digital. Yeah.
I read, I don't have it in the show notes, but it was the prediction, I think, maybe even by the FCC, is that in the next year or two, I think the number of drones is going to probably triple. It's just, it's going to explode. What was the name of that drone that you said he flew, the bug drone? Do you remember what kind it was?
I'll have to see if I can find it. I can tweet it. He's
drop
one of my EdTech. He told it to me several times because he does drone racing as well, which is really fun. He wants to get me to go and do that with him, which is neat. We're going to set one up with some kids and do like a little drone racing league, kind of like Harry Potter-esque, going through hoops and stuff like that, like a little Quidditch game. But it's interesting to see how it's changed. Like my own daughter's walking down from our lake house, and I couldn't hear him on the walkie-talkie, so I flew the drone up and flew it out over the woods and found them 800, 900 feet away, and they saw me looking at them. So I'm like that creepy dad that's like, "Get back!" I couldn't yell at him because it doesn't talk, but yeah, it's gonna be interesting in their future for sure.
Wow. All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour, and we
Okay.
need to do some geeks of the week. So, what do you have for your geek of the week?
Well, speaking of VR, because that's a big talk that we talked about earlier in the show, I know I put Ready Player One, which have you read it?
I've only seen the previews, and it looks great.
Oh, you've got to read the book.
Okay.
Easy read, really easy read. But if you're a fan of the '80s technology, Atari, all the things, music, movies, it's all ties to that. And the author Ernest Cline is actually based here in Austin, and he did a whole documentary about uncovering the ET cartridges. Remember, there used to be 1 million of these cartridges for Atari,
Oh yeah.
and they were in some trash dump somewhere in New Mexico. And he did a documentary about trying to uncover where these were because that game was so bad that Atari had to dump them in a garbage heap somewhere.
I think I actually did try to play that, and it was like, what's the point?
It's so hard to play. So anyway, the movie is interesting because it's two worlds. It's a physical world, which is based out of Oklahoma City, of all places, is where the main character is based. I think in the movie they're going to make it Columbus, Ohio, which is going to be a little bit of a poetic license. But in the movie, he's based at Oklahoma City, and essentially all the towns now have become these stacks where they take RVs and stack them on top of each other. And it's just, there's a lot of, there's no real work. All the economy runs in this virtual world. So you talk about Facebook and all the money that's in, right? So this guy's invented this world. He's very much a Steve Jobs type character, and he dies. And when he dies, he leaves these Easter eggs and says, if you can uncover all the Easter eggs, you can own the world. It's called the Oasis. And so essentially the whole movie or the book plays out that there's this one character who's a poor kid from Oklahoma City who basically goes and he knows so much about it because all he has is time. So he discovers all these little Easter eggs. And at some point you have to like play a role of a character in a movie. I don't know if they'll do this in the movie, but in the book, you had to be Ferris Bueller and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And you get points based on how well you deliver your lines. You remember we were talking earlier about being in the VR movie itself. So there's a lot of cool, I'm excited to see what the futuristic stuff that they're going to showcase, but you can be anybody you want to be. And that's the amazing thing about that world. And then financially, of course, there's money that takes place in this virtual world. Kind of like, remember Second Life a long time ago,
Yeah.
only bigger. Yeah.
And,
so that's my
and it comes out next week. Is that correct?
The 28th. Yeah, I think, or the 29th is full launch. I think a bunch of us are going the night of the 28th, 10 o'clock, which is crazy, but we're going to go late at night and watch it, the debut. So it'll be fun.
Awesome. All right. And mine is just a quick little video. It's a ad actually by Cadillac, but a 30-second ad called Future Cars. But we've got KIT, we got the Jetsons, we've got Back to the Future, all these, fun movies. And then they're talking about, their self-driving capabilities that are in there. So I thought that'd be, sometimes I like for those kind of videos to throw in a presentation or something like that. And it definitely helps people connect to the projections of the future, which we've had, that we've been exposed to, and then how those kinds of things predicted by science fiction are becoming true today. So pretty fun.
And it's got a good soundtrack too.
It does, absolutely. So, all right. Well, Carl, where can people connect with you if they want to continue the learning and the dialogue with you?
Yeah. So a few things. Twitter is the best place to get me, at Mr. Hooker. And I've got a series of books out, 6 books, mobile learning mindsets, that are all launched now finally as of last June. I've just started putting courses out on participate.com, including one for mobile learning. I'm doing a parent course coming up pretty soon, and I got about 3 others that I'm supposed to be done before ISTE, so we'll see if I can get that done in time. But I really like the Participate platform. I don't know if you've played with it at all, but it's device agnostic. It's very easy to use on anything, and it's kind of been a neat way to Monica Burns is the one who showed me it, and then Tom Murray and a few other folks. So I'm starting to put some stuff out on there and see how it goes. I like it because it's a lot more dynamic than a book in a lot of ways. So
cool.
Yeah, so I'm trying that. So, but yeah, Mr. Hooker at Twitter. I share a lot of stuff freely. I give a lot of stuff away. I do sell some things, but I don't make anything on them because we're educators and we're silly that way. But yeah.
And what I've learned a long time ago is, a lot of times if those are entrees to gigs, if you have a chance to go to a presentation, many times you can, be compensated from a presentation far more than, selling a stack of books. But it helps people know what you're an expert on and, your advocacy platform and that kind of thing. So
and poetry next. So be careful. Watch out for and I think we're also doing an EdTech lip sync battle. Brianna Hodges and I at ISTE. And I will just tell you that'll be something to see. If you can make it to that, if you're making it at ISTE and you can go to our event and it's free, it's during ISTE. It's one of the sessions. I think it's in the afternoon on Tuesday.
If you've got links, to those. If you can drop those in the show notes, I'll
Yeah, I will.
for people.
I think it's gonna be recorded too. I just found out, which is gonna be really embarrassing because I'm gonna be trying to sing and dance on stage. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. That
awesome.
drama you talked about it with your daughter. You got to have that drama.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I am W Fryer on Twitter, posting at speedofcreativity.org periodically. I've been working on a digital citizenship website for school. That's digcit.us, where we've got a series of videos with short questions, and hopefully before the end of this year, and then moving into the summer next year, we'll take that to the next level with students creating some of these short narrative slideshows to talk about current issues, like some of the stuff we've talked about today with regard to, Twitter and Facebook logins to accounts and Google. There's all kinds of things, but anyway, digital citizenship is definitely an advocacy area, a passion that Carl and I share, and important to continue those conversations. So we want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thank you, Carl, so much for taking an hour out of your week. Are you on spring break or not?
No, we're done. We're back. We're back on. So, but happy to be back at work in some ways.
All right. Well, awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking the time, and we will hopefully get to check in with you again later on the show down the road.
Thank you, Wes. Thanks for having me.